Why are Chinese spies secretly working inside of Canada's BIOLABs? Well, that's something we should probably want to get to the bottom of in Canada immediately. But if you're the Trudeau government, you don't want to do this at all, and you don't want an investigation. In fact, Pierre Poilievre, the opposition, says that the Trudeau government, Justin Trudeau, called a snap election in order to hide and cover up this scandal. So what is going on? Chinese spies inside of Canada's biolabs? Let's ask David Clayton, who's been writing about this at the Post Millennial, and he joins us today from Ottawa, wearing a very handsome redacted hoodie, by the way. Thank you so much for that, David. Good to see you. So what is going on here? China spies inside of Canada's biolabs? Is this just an isolated event?
Well, it's quite a story, Clayton, and I'll try to unpack as much of this as I can in an understandable manner. Because usually when you face a story like this, it's the details that bog people down. But what I believe is going on here is Trudeau's Watergate. Because the deeper people dig into this, the more ramifications and consequences it has on Trudeau's corrupt government. But just to get into what happened here, approximately between 2018 and 2021, at the Winnipeg Microbiology Lab, the National Microbiology Lab, where Canada is conducting its biological research. Most people weren't even aware this lab existed, but this is basically on par with the Wuhan Virology Institute in China. And so there's some heavy duty secret research going on here. And this lab employed two scientists from China who apparently, got this job through a Chinese program that exists to hire people in foreign countries. And it's called the China's Thousand Talents Program, which once again I had never heard of this. So these two doctors, Xing Guo Chu and her husband Kedling Cheng, and I wanted to get these names right, were hired to work in the lab. And then what the Canadian Intelligence Service discovered was that Dr. Chu was sending back intelligence information and pathogens to China, which were being used by the People's Liberation Army, amongst others. Now, this went on for years. For years. The two were finally fired and sent back to China in 2021. Immediately thereafter, all evidence of this, all documentation was suppressed by the Trudeau government, and Trudeau called a snap election in 2021. Very, very suspicious. Now, I'll go on in a minute about why that's very suspicious. But what's interesting here is that nobody's calling this an espionage case or spying. That's clearly what was going on. And that's what CSIS identified here, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. They identified a pattern of spying. Nobody was ever charged with espionage. Nobody was ever charged with spying. But nonetheless, when you read what was going on from the CSIS reports, that's clearly what was going on here. Now, my question is, why did it take so long to react to this situation when CSIS was aware of it? And why did the government cover it up immediately upon the dismissal of these two scientists?
So when you talk about Watergate, you talk about where this rises, who knew what when, right? That's, of course, the big questions that emerge. And how high did it go? Did the Trudeau government, did Justin Trudeau himself become aware of this and then make moves to try to cover it up? I guess that's the devil's in the details here.
Well, that's exactly it. My question, though, is was there a quid pro quo? Did the Trudeau government knowingly facilitate this activity, this release of information and pathogens back to China because they wanted Chinese election interference in 2021? Here's the connection nobody's really making, I think, except me at this point, is that in 2021, China interfered in Canada's federal election. A CSIS whistleblower revealed that. And he said Trudeau had been briefed about that election interference. But did Trudeau know about that election interference beforehand? Did he want that election interference because he knew it would help him win another election, which of course it did. And the fact that China interfered in 2021 is known. That's a fact. I'm wondering whether or not there was collusion here because this government is so corrupt and it is so seething with hypocrisy and absolute inability to be held accountable. And once again, when Trudeau was confronted with this information, what did he do? He said, "Not my fault. Didn't happen. It didn't happen because of anything I did. Anything that happens on a prime minister's watch is ultimately his responsibility or her responsibility." And Trudeau, once again, refuses to take any responsibility, refuses to be held accountable for this. And in fact, what does he do? He blames the conservatives for making an issue out of this, just like he blamed Russia for inviting a Nazi to the parliamentary gallery. He's running distraction again.
He has a knack for that. Like he does something and then he blames the conservatives or somebody else for his problems. So Pierre Poilievre has called this out. So what does the snap election piece of this in 2021 have to do with this? So he calls a snap election after this was discovered, after these Chinese spies were sent back to China. Why is that a big deal? What is the significance of that?
Well, clearly, Trudeau did not want this issue to become public before the next election. He wanted to be reelected so he could then continue to cover it up as prime minister. And that's exactly what he did. These documents have been sitting dormant for literally 3 years. And they're finally surfaced last week. And the government is now saying, oh, it's because of national security classification. Of course, that's absolute nonsense. There's no evidence that CSIS advocated for that or any security agency advocated for that. This is completely fabricated. This was a national security issue. That's why we had to bury these documents for 3 years. Now, they suddenly appear last week, but I believe Trudeau wanted a snap election because he knew he could win it with Chinese assistance. I believe that that's what's behind all of this. And Trudeau took the unprecedented move. This is what really has shaken me, of suing the Speaker of the House to not release these documents. You might recall Anthony Rota was the guy who fell on his sword over the invitation of a former Nazi Waffen-SS soldier coming to hear Zelensky speak in the House of Commons. He got a seat in the parliamentary gallery and got 2 standing ovations. Anthony Rota, the speaker at the time, resigned over that, saying it was all my fault. And I will take full responsibility for that. Trudeau had already sued Anthony Rota, the same individual, because Rota wanted these documents to be made public. He said, as speaker, I think I should be releasing these documents to the public. I think that's a fairly courageous thing for Rota to do. I didn't think he was really capable of that until I discovered this. So was Rota hung out to dry over the Yaroslav Hunka incident? Clearly, he was involved to some extent, but was that the opportunity Trudeau had to get rid of this guy too, because he knew too much? And how many other people know too much about this? Because just this week, the ethics committee, the parliamentary ethics committee, wanted to examine this further. At least the conservative members of that ethics committee said, we need to investigate this further. Because why did it take so long to fire these two? Why did it take 3 years for these documents to be released? Why did Trudeau call a snap election as soon as these two were dismissed? There's something smells here. The Liberal and NDP members of the ethics committee have said, nope, we're going to shut this down right now. So when I see that, having been involved in watching politics for the decades that I have, the alarm bells go off for me that there's more here. If they don't want any investigation at all, if they want this to remain completely in the dark, then I suspect the deeper we dig, the deeper dive we make into this material, the more onerous it's going to be on this government.
I think you're 100% correct about that. I also think it probably, my gut instinct on this is that this doesn't stop with just 2 Chinese spies in Canada. Something else is going on here. Just like we saw this illicit Chinese biolab in California that was discovered recently. How many other labs are in Canada that have some sort of either Chinese funding, Chinese backing, Chinese individuals working there, Chinese scientists working there in Canada? I find it very hard to believe that this just stops with those 2 individuals. Do you?
I would find that very hard to believe as well. But what also strikes me is, why does Trudeau keep coming up with China? Every time China is involved in something Canadian, Trudeau is involved. You have to remember, Trudeau infamously remarked that his favorite country in the world was China. He called it the basic dictatorship. We have repeated that many times. I think he was serious about that. And there's another incident that is so striking in its symbolic meaning. At the G20 conference 2022, Trudeau had a brief discussion. I call it a brief discussion with the Chinese dictator, who literally dressed him down, told him, stop going public with our conversations. What kind of a politician are you? Don't you know some things have to be confidential? Here you go talking about our confidence. And Trudeau was literally so upset, he ran to the men's room, either to throw up or relieve himself, while his chief of staff stood there looking quite embarrassed.
Yeah.
This was all captured on camera, of course. But it's like Trudeau was taking his orders from his masters in China. And there is a connection here in terms of Trudeau, how Trudeau is being used by China, and conversely, how Trudeau uses China in the electoral function. And this is the most alarming. And I do believe this could be the scandal that brings this corrupt Trudeau government down, because there's just so much here that is undiscovered. And I hope we have enough people willing to take the risk to dig deeper into the story.
See if the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, will go after this and start to investigate. There's a lot here. Let's see if the state-run media will look into it. Probably not. And of course, we do remember Klaus Schwab praising Justin Trudeau. And one of the reasons he praised Justin Trudeau, we have on film, is his love of China. Klaus Schwab praising Trudeau for his love of China. So something is going on here, and I think you're right in that assessment. But this is what we know right now. These 2 Chinese spies in the snap election to try to cover up this investigation and keep these documents hidden, and what was going on here hidden from the Canadian people. David Creighton, thank you so much as always. I know you'll be staying on top of this story, and we will be watching it closely. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Clayton.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it, and we will see you next time, everyone.